150 years ago, the United States of America had been at war with itself for over 2 years. The Great Civil War had engulfed the nation in a sea of bloodshed, testing, in the words of President Abraham Lincoln, whether that nation or any nation so conceived or dedicated can long endure. The arduous trials of the Union armies to this point had been frustrating, with a few bloody victories in places such as Shiloh, Antietam, and Perryville, offset by defeats at Bull Run, Fredericksburg, and Chancellorsville. But these battles honed the combat prowess of the Northern soldiers, and perhaps even more importantly, served as a proving ground for new leaders such as Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman. The monumental battles of Gettysburg and Vicksburg in the summer of 1863 would test the soldiers and their leaders amidst campaigns that would irrevocably turn the tide of the war in the Union favor. Confederate General Robert E. Lee's decision to invade Maryland and Pennsylvania in June 1863 set the stage for one of the most significant battles ever to be fought on American soil. As the Army of Northern Virginia marched north, the Army of the Potomac, bent but not broken at the Battle of Chancellorsville, doggedly pursued, ensuring it remained between the Confederates and the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. A chance encounter between Confederate infantry and Union cavalry on June 30th near the Pennsylvania crossroads town of Gettysburg began a three-day battle that ended with a decisive Union victory and the retreat of General Lee and his army back to Virginia. But it was a close-run affair. On June 1st, Union cavalry, commanded by Brigadier General John Buford, held off Harry Heath's division just long enough for the infantry of the Union 1st and 11th Corps to move into position north and west of Gettysburg. Confederate attacks nearly broke the Union forces, but the Federal soldiers managed to hold on to Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill and the ridge running to their south, ensuring a strong defensive position for the remainder of the fight. The next day, July 2nd, Lee tested the southern flank of the Union line. An assault led by Lieutenant General James Longstreet nearly succeeded in turning the flank of the Army of the Potomac, anchored on two hills known now as Little Round Top and Big Round Top. But Union forces, among them the redoubtable 20th Maine, commanded by Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, held these positions against repeated Confederate assaults. Rebel attacks on the northern and southern ends of the Union line left the center temporarily denuded of troops and therefore vulnerable. The collapse of Major General Dan Sickles' 3rd Corps in the Peach Orchard and Wheat Field enabled Confederate troops to endanger the Union position on Cemetery Ridge, arguably the most tactically important piece of ground on the battlefield. It was here, in the center of the Union line, late on the second day of battle, that Minnesotans played a crucial role in the battle's outcome. Late in the afternoon of July 2nd, the Union lines were splintering under the weight of Longstreet's assault. As the infantry of the 3rd Corps retreated, only a few stalwart regiments remained on line to stem the Confederate tide, now cresting towards Cemetery Ridge. It was a critical moment. In fact, far more fraught with danger than the more celebrated charge by Pickett's division and other Confederate forces the next day, which slammed against a wall of fully prepared Federal troops. On this day, however, 2 brigades of Confederate infantry from Alabama and Florida advanced unopposed towards the Union center. Major General Winfield Scott Hancock, commander of the Union 2nd Corps and the senior officer on site, looked around for troops to stem the Confederate advance, while messengers galloped furiously to order reinforcements to the endangered hole in the Union line. The only troops nearby were from the 1st Minnesota Regiment, perhaps 230 men arrayed against 10 times their number. "Charge those lines," Hancock ordered, pointing to the Confederate troops. The charge into the Confederate lines would be a forlorn hope, meant to buy time for other reserve units to move to the sound of the guns. I had no alternative but to order that regiment in, Hancock later explained. I saw that in some way 5 minutes must be gained, or we were lost. The Minnesotans gained Hancock 5 minutes times 3. Without protest, Colonel William Colville led his men in a charge down the slope into the Confederate brigades arrayed along Plum Run. Concealed by smoke, the Minnesotans burst without warning upon a brigade of Alabamians. The Confederate troops, facing the leveled bayonets of the Minnesotans, broke. The Minnesotans then halted and poured a volley of musket fire into the Confederate ranks. The charge was so fierce that the Confederate commanders believed they faced a much more substantial foe than a single regiment, and so they decided to withdraw and regroup. 15 minutes after attacking into the Confederate ranks, the 1st Minnesota withdrew from the fighting. Of the 230 or so men who made the charge, 183 were killed or wounded, fully 80% or more of the regiment. But their sacrifice had gained just enough time to save the Union position on Cemetery Ridge, and with it, the Battle of Gettysburg. Union reinforcements marched to plug the hole in the line and staved off the Confederate assault when it resumed. It but remained for Robert E. Lee to complete his defeat by committing his remaining forces the next day in an ill-considered assault into the Union center that sealed the fate of his army, and with it, the Confederacy. And so today we commemorate with this monument the brave deeds of those Minnesotans who helped to save the Union a century and a half ago near a small town in Pennsylvania, and who by their courage and devotion defended the nation that we still cherish today. As President Lincoln stated in his Gettysburg Address, it is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. Thank you all for coming out today to honor the memory of those Minnesotans who served in the Civil War. May this monument and the future one to be built remind you of their service and sacrifice in the cause of freedom and for the preservation of the Union of these United States. May God bless Minnesota, may God bless the United States of America, and may you all have a very enjoyable Independence Day.